Portions of KDKR's daily programming do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, today, signs of a car that has been in a flood. Today, we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know, I do appreciate it. In the studio, it's Tony Joe. He's here with me every Friday, and to take your car corner questions, 1-877-913-5357. His number to call, and I do have a line open. Would love to hear from you today. If you got a question for me, you can always go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Send a question into the Ask Bob section, and I will get you taken care of. That's all at the website, prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5357. Well, Tony Joe, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I got to tell you a story. I don't think I've ever told you this.
Okay.
I was in a furniture store, and I was checking out. We just bought a desk for the home office,
okay.
And this lady took my card, and she saw Prudent Money, and she goes, "Hey, wait a minute! I listened to that program. Do you know the guy who hosts that?" I said, "Well, I'm the guy who hosts that." And she goes, "Are you kidding?" She goes, "I thought you were a whole lot older than you look." So I had, obviously we talk on the radio and you can't see.
Doesn't that make you feel good, though?
I guess.
It's okay to admit it. I mean, that should make you feel good.
So anyway, I had a conversation with someone today, and they said, "What does Tony Joe look like?"
Oh,
And
no,
how do you describe a man of such perfection? I don't know. But I said, "Well, what do you think he looks like?" And I almost hesitate to say this.
You're better off not asking that question. Now, you didn't describe what I looked like, did you? Because I know you would have not told the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Hold on a second. Okay, so no, I didn't have this conversation. I was secondhand on this conversation.
Oh, okay.
This conversation. So this person told me that you, in his eyes, looked like a Harvard intellect.
Well, in my defense, let me just say, what we're learning about Harvard graduates is not what it used to be. So I, in fact, could be. I don't know if I ever told you this. I actually did go to Harvard. Did you know that?
Is this a joke coming out?
I went to a lot of the listeners who listen to this program probably remember Click and Clack, the show, the nationwide show that occurred from Boston with the two guys that had the garage up in Boston. Their names, Tom Mariazzi but Ray Mariazzi, but they were known as Click and Clack, and I know a lot of listeners probably remember that. I actually drove to Boston to meet them way back in like 1990 or 91, I can't remember. And on my way, for those of you who know Boston, it is not a fun city to try to drive in, but I was going down Massachusetts Avenue. And there, lo and behold, I'm stopped at a light, and there's Harvard to my right.
Mm-hmm, right.
The building. So I had to just stop and get out and stand on the steps just so I could say that I've been to Harvard. So the guy is not totally wrong, okay?
Harvard intellect.
I'm not a Harvard grad, but I have been to Harvard.
Well, you know a few things, so I guess we could call you intellectual.
I know stuff.
Do you also know, I don't think anybody missed any of the great content, but your mic was off for the first minute there. But I got you back on before you started telling your story, so
okay,
that's good. 1-877-913-5357. I do have a line open. I thought you would take that and run with that a little bit further than you did.
Well, I wasn't prepared.
That's why.
Plus,
I
you
didn't
keep
tell
forgetting
you.
to turn my mic up all the time. It makes me feel bad.
Is it giving you a complex?
It's almost like you're embarrassed to have me.
Oh, heavens, no.
You know,
Tony
Bob,
Joe.
I want to point out something that just so you'll know. We talked about this earlier today, and I just thought I forgot all about it. But the man with that
Yes.
problem did call me back about 10 minutes before I had to leave.
Well, back up and tell
Okay.
the first part of that story.
So, had an issue. Bob likes me to talk about things strange things that happened this week, and I can never remember because every day I just shut down and go on to the next day. But anyway, something happened this week that was kind of interesting. The person brought a vehicle in that had been to a place, several places, I guess, trying to diagnose a problem with a hesitation when they accelerate. Turns out that indeed I drove the car, and indeed it did hesitate when you accelerate. So I looked at the vehicle for a few minutes, and I tried to evaluate what may be happening. And I pulled the work tickets from the estimates she got from other places, and they wanted to change things like timing belts. Timing chain. Timing chain, for those of you that don't know, significantly more expensive than a timing belt like we have on so many cars. That with changing spark plugs and a new fuel pump and, things like that were changed and tried, and then the next shop wanted to change the spark plugs again. They were just changed, not more than 10,000 miles earlier. So there was a lot of guesswork going on here, and I didn't know for sure why all these high cost estimates were coming in. And so I evaluated, and my opinion was that she had a restricted exhaust somewhere. So I recommended that they take it to a muffler shop, have the exhaust system tested. They can test for back pressure certain places here and there. And sure enough, it had a restriction in the exhaust. It was in the catalytic converter. But it was at the early stages of bothering someone. You know your car's not right, but it really isn't doing anything dramatic. It just has this hesitation on tip-in when you try to accelerate. Very hard to diagnose. If it was left alone and kept driving this car, it would have gotten worse and worse and worse, and a little easier to find. But in any case, we got it resolved. It was a restriction in the exhaust. And she had to have a new converter for considerably less money than all those estimates that she was getting for basically what I consider at this point, now that I've reviewed everything and seen everything for myself, I consider those all guesses.
Yeah,
That's
so
what they were
when
doing.
you
They
say
were guessing.
places, were you saying like 3 estimates all about the same thing, just kind of throwing parts at it to see
No,
if it...
none of the estimates matched. That's why she was
Oh,
so discouraged.
okay, I
because
see.
none of the estimates, everybody wanted to do expensive things, but different things.
Oh, okay.
And so it was brought to my attention just because a friend of a friend said, hey, why don't you call Tony and see if he can give you another opinion. And so that's the way it worked out. And the man did call me before the show, Bob, and I told you I would follow up on this. It is running good. He actually told me, he said, hey, Tony, they charged me, I forget what, 3-something or 300, and I can't remember. But anyway, he said, they put a V6 in instead of the 4-cylinder, and they charged me $386, let's just say. I go, what? He goes, yeah, that's how it runs, man. All the power's back, the acceleration. I said, so he was joking. They put a V6
right.
in
Yeah.
because he had a 4-cylinder. I said, so you got a V6 motor instead of a 4-cylinder, and you got away for $386? That's great. Just sneak on out of there. Just keep driving. Don't look back. Anyway, it's a personal thing, I guess. You didn't get it, but you don't laugh at any of my jokes, ever.
I try not to encourage it. 1-877-913-5357. So, okay, let's say that you find yourself in a situation like that, and the difference being that you've got a skill level that the vast majority of mechanics experience as well, and that they don't have. So what if you keep running into this roadblock?
See, this is what I wanted to point out, and I'm sorry that you're taking it that hey, bring it to you. I know everything. I do not know everything.
No,
I'm
that's
not
fine.
bragging myself up. What I'm trying to point out is, Bob, when we've always advised people when they get some huge bill that they're not quite sure what's going on, and their intuition tells them, I don't know, maybe that's not we always recommend get a second opinion. Well, she got a second opinion and a third opinion, and it just didn't work. This is one of those rare cases where it just didn't work, Sometimes there's situations that slip through the cracks. But just going back, I just want to reiterate that when you get a big ticket item like that, you want to get a second opinion, somebody to verify that in fact is what's wrong with it.
Okay, so obviously these couple of or 2 or 3 estimates that she got doing different things ultimately would not fix the problem.
Right, they wouldn't have.
Okay, so what happens in your situation with a shop that, okay, I'm going to replace the timing chain, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and she takes it, it still has that problem. What then?
Well, then you've got a customer that's severely disappointed, first of all.
Sure, so I've just dropped $800, $900.
Well, way more than that.
$1,500.
This was $6,600 for some of the things they wanted to do.
66.
One of them, the highest one.
$6,600.
Right. So you see, I think about that too. Now, I don't approach things in that way. I never do. I like to do my diagnosis up front. I don't want to guess. And if I can't figure it out at the time, I tell them, keep driving it. I know it's inconvenient, but it's not dangerous at that point. If it was dangerous, I would not advise them. But sometimes you just got to let things get a little bit worse so you can actually pinpoint the problem and not have to guess at it.
This is Bob Brooks, 1-877-913-5357. Up against the break. Stick around. Be right back. Hi, this is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. Well, 2022 has been a miserable year for investing. Will 2023 bring the same? Times like this have a way of making us feel stuck, not knowing what to do. Well, there are 2 keys to success in any kind of market. First, you have to be informed, but second, you have to receive that information in a way that anyone can understand it. This is my objective with the next Prudent Money webinar. There are 5 main questions that you should be asking right now. Number 1, what is a bear market and what does a bear market really look like? This could tell us a whole lot about 2023. Number 2, why is it important to understand cycles when it comes to growing my retirement? Number 3, what do I need to know about inflation? How high will these prices go? How do I protect myself from inflation? Number 4, why should I be careful with bonds? Number 5, what steps do I take now? What are my options? Well, if you're unsure about the future, then this webinar is for you. Sign up now for the 5 questions that could save your retirement. There's 2 times we're going to present this webinar. The first one is on Wednesday, October 26th at noon, and the second one is Friday, October the 28th at noon as well. Today, sign up at prudentmoney.com.
Bible verses like, don't repay evil for evil, are easy to understand but difficult to live out. Monday on Focal Point, Pastor Mike Fabarez teaches us about a time when David had the opportunity to get revenge and kill Saul, which would have solved a lot of his short-term problems. Hear what he did instead, Monday on Focal Point.
.8:30 a.m. on Bible School Radio 91.3.
We're wrapping up our series called The Pastor's Study this week on Truth for Life. Discover the key ingredient to effective preaching and find out why the message of the cross is central to the faith. It needs to be central to our preaching as well. Listen to Truth for Life with Alistair Begg.
Weekdays at 5:30 a.m. here on 91.3 KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to this special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. 1-877-913-5357. If you want to talk to Tony Joe, I do have a line open. Something you said, you squeezed it in the last 15 seconds because you had to, And I got to think, that's just such great advice. Rare that, one of the things I want to point out, and when I was talking about the way that you handle it, one of the things I didn't say, and I'm going to brag on you because I want to.
Please don't.
But is your ethics and the way that you run your business, and that's I got to tell you that's as valuable as experience, just so that you know when you're looking for somebody. But you said, listen, we don't don't have a solution right now for you, but go drive the car because it's going to get worse. And who says that? I mean, talk about that a little bit.
Well, sometimes that's the best approach to take is if you cannot identify the problem and you've done your homework and you've tried to diagnose this thing and you've covered to the best of your ability every detail that you can think of and you still come up dry, my solution is to keep driving the car. Whatever's wrong with it is going to get a little bit worse. It's going to get more frequent and a little more identifiable. Now, it's much better to do that so that you can pinpoint the problem when it gets worse. It's easier to identify. Now you're getting more bang for, you're putting your money in the right spot. You're not guessing. You're not throwing money at it. This is sometimes what has to happen. Now, let me just say, you got to be careful because there are situations where it can be dangerous to drive the car with a certain.
Yeah, I don't
so
think
you don't do it in those cases.
I think it's something if the mechanic says who's looked at your car and says, "Hey, you're not taking any risk," and obviously
right.
they don't say that without being pretty pretty positive.
Right.
But just
in this particular case that we're talking about right now, the one that happened.
Hesitation is.
She's been driving it for 6 months like this, and the young girl made me feel bad. She goes, "Yeah, it takes me a lot of practice to merge on the highway." As in,
gosh.
she's really got to struggle to
more
work than it should take to get in traffic on the highway and then get, going. So it's not like it was dangerous to her. She's been driving this car because nobody can figure it out. She's been suffering with it for 6 months. So it wasn't one of these situations where I would say don't drive it. It's too dangerous. I mean, she's been driving it for 6 months like this. And I would have, had I not been able to identify it, I would have said, just keep driving it. Let it get worse till we can bring it back in and see what the problem is.
You also said something, too, that I always like to do the upfront diagnostics.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a somewhat of a red flag if you're talking to somebody, you're telling what's wrong with your car, they go back and they look at it for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and they come back with a $6,600 estimate. The question would be, what have you done to confirm that this is what is going to fix my car? And a question, Tony Joe, you can probably speak to this. I'll bet you that nobody ever asks, and that is, what if you fix my car and I write you a check for $6,600 and it's still doing it? Mm-hmm. What's my recourse?
Yeah, you should ask. You probably ought to ask that because.
But I mean, how many
that's
times?
A lot of money, and
a lot of people don't. I would say the high majority of people don't. They think because I'm spending $6,600, I'm going to get it fixed.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, that's where you have to consider the fact that are you going to tell this person that their car is fixed and charge them $6,600, knowing full well the minute they get in the car, they're going to see that it's doing the same thing? That's just wrong. That's just not ethical.
Right.
And that's where you have to say to yourself, well, had they up front maybe said, well, we're going to do all this work and we're going to try and see if that fixes it. Now, that would be different. That sets the stage for a whole new set of circumstances. But if they say this is going to fix the car and then it doesn't fix the car, that's just wrong to let them take the car and pay for it knowing full well that it doesn't work right. So there's an awful lot to it. And I don't, Bob, my opinion is most shops wouldn't do that.
Right.
Not all shops are bad.
They
wouldn't do that.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, giving money back in that situation would be the right thing to do, but it would be a futile effort because they're going to see that it doesn't didn't fix the car the minute they get in it.
Yeah, I guess with the more stories I read and situations that people tell me about, it's just amazing what the small number of people that make your industry look bad, make my industry look bad, make anybody's industry look bad. You just can never put it past a person what they're capable of doing. And you gotta check some boxes whether you want to, or you need to check some boxes whether you want to or not.
And there's less and less young folks that are getting into this business, and a lot of mechanical facilities, service centers and garages, independent or dealerships, they're having problems getting help, Bob. They're running short on people to actually work on cars. So, you got to think of it like any other business. There's less places to choose from, and there's less people that are able to work on your car. So the ones that are left can go that route and abuse people if they want to. But it's not right.
So tell me, what has shifted, in your opinion, that has created this problem, this employment scarcity?
I think it's really due to a couple of different factors, and I'm not an economist like you. I mean, I would never challenge you, but I'll tell you what I personally think. Number one, the COVID checks. That was a big thing because the COVID checks and the money that they got from unemployment and the extra money they got at the end of the month from unemployment, all that factored into where people just didn't really want to work. They would rather sit home.
Right.
And because of that, it has now, even though it's ended, now it has kind of bled into the situation we're having right now, which is people don't want to work very hard if they don't have to, and I don't blame them. But working on cars is not easy. It's not just physically demanding, but you have to have an awful lot of knowledge about an awful lot of different subjects just to be able to understand how a car works. So nobody wants to do all that for the money they're going to make. They'd rather go into computers and, get, better job, you might say, better paying job with less, you're a mechanic, you're usually working in the heat of the summer and the cold in the winter. It's not a fun job, but It's a necessary evil because if we keep losing facilities, you're going to be, the big fear I have is when you have only the dealer to choose from, and that's the only place to get your car fixed. The independents keep the dealers honest. Once the independents drop out one by one because they can't afford to stay in business anymore, that's when car repair bills and things are just going to be out of control. That's when it gets really scary. The independents, you might say, keep the dealers in check. Somewhere.
Sure. So, what have you seen quite a bit of your independent people shut down?
Some have completely closed up, and some are barely surviving with a skeleton crew. If you don't have enough workers that can operate enough volume to pay your bills, then...
Yeah, I guess what doesn't add up to me, and of course when it comes to the unemployment situation, none of these scenarios numbers have ever added up to me ever since COVID hit. But it would just seem like that the need for independent garages, because it's going to be a different experience than the dealership. It's going to probably be a less expensive 99% of the time. Mm-hmm. You would think that the need is great, is big to have independent garages around. So it's interesting to me that they're closing down, I guess.
Well, I mean, they are, remember, there's a lot easier ways to make money. So either the pay is going to have to increase or the independents are going to just have to maintain the best they can with a skeleton crew, which usually means only a matter of time before they go out of business because, you got to turn over a lot of cars just to make it, and every independent knows what I'm talking about. And it's a lot of hours, and it's a lot of demanding work, and it's something that doesn't seem like the money you make is worth the time and effort you put into it.
Right.
But then again, I could probably have a different job and say the same thing. I don't know. If I had another job like yours, I couldn't stand the stress alone. There isn't a normal amount of money you could pay me to do your job just because of the stress involved.
Sure. Well, and, you know, from the standpoint of looking forward into the future, you have, of course, electric cars and just all kinds of interesting things that you've got to kind of pivot.
Yep, there will be changes.
And the independent garage has to pivot, because you're right. It's going to be a sad day when everything depends on the dealership because they got you right where they want you.
Well, for one thing, there's not enough dealerships to be able to handle the volume.
Yeah, that's true. That's true,
You'll have to wait weeks to get your car fixed.
That is definitely true. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. We are towards the end of the program, so make sure that you do go to prudentmoney.com and sign up for the webinar next week, and we'll get you send you out a link and get you set up. This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.